Welcome to the Immigration Rights webinar. I'm Maya Flores, she, her, Fresno, California, and I'm just going to be facilitating the call for today. So really quickly, just going to go over the agenda. So we're going to do about half of the call for presentations and the other half for question and answer. We're going to do some intros. If you people on the call want to introduce yourself, you can do it in the chat box. We're going to have participants muted until it's their time to speak. And also, we're going to do introductions with Blanca and Jose Perez for about 15 minutes. Then we're going to discuss the mobilization effort for October 12th through the 14th. We're going to go over national planning, current locations, roles for DSA members, such as planning, communications. This is going to be Elizabeth for about 15 minutes. Then we're going to be talking about organizing coalitions and so forth. This will be Elijah for 10 minutes. Moving on to internal working group organizing, and lastly, question and answer for about 30 minutes. We will be using Stack, which is, if you would like to speak, please type the word Stack into the chat box. We will be using progressive Stack, and we will be prioritizing regions from impacted regions, and also based on experience with immigration rights. So is there anything else that I should add, Elijah?
I would just say for everybody who's on the call who's an attendee, make sure that when you are typing into the chat, you select the button so that it sends to all panelists and attendees. If you just select all panelists, it goes to the group of us who are visible and speaking, and not to everybody else in the working group. And we'll try and drop links there. We know that won't get to those who are calling in on the phone. And some of these links, we've tried to make short bit.ly links so that they can be read out to you if you are calling in on the phone. And if there's any technical issues, please drop those in all panelists and attendees, and Maya or myself will try and answer those questions.
Okay, great. So I guess we can start with the first introduction of panelists. Would Blanca like to go first? Blanca?
No? Am I live? Yes. Okay. Hi. I'm Blanca Esteves. I am my home base is Northwest Arkansas. Y'all just voted me to be one of your MPC members, so that's cool. I work in the nonprofit world, but I'm heavily focused on immigration. So I'm here if y'all need me for anything, for sure. I think that's it. Oh, she, her pronouns, sorry.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Blanca. Next up is Jose Perez. Jose?
Hi, I'm Jose. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm active in the local immigrant rights movement and in the DSA, of course. I've been active in the movement for a very long time, so I won't go into any of the details, but just pass it on to, I guess, Elizabeth will be next.
All right, thank you so much, Jose. And next up will be Elizabeth Wrigley-Field discussing national mobilization's call to action for DSA chapters and roles for DSA members. Elizabeth, are you ready?
Sure. So I guess it makes sense to start maybe with a little bit of context about where this call is coming from, this webinar that we're doing, and also the call to action that we're going to propose that chapters take up. So, I mean, obviously, one part of the context here is that on the one hand, we're in a situation where, you know, it feels like many people, certainly on the left, but also like coworkers or relatives of ours, are kind of grappling with the question. You know, we're seeing concentration camps on our border and this kind of anguished sense of what can we do What can I do to try to stop that? And the horrific treatment of children and of family separation in particular, I think has, kind of blown open the broader cruelty of immigrant detention and deportation in a way that is really affecting large numbers of people. So on the one hand, there's that, but on the other hand, there's a gap between that sentiment for action and a lack of infrastructure to create the action on the scale that there's kind of this possibility for. Immigrant rights groups are absolutely overwhelmed by the scale of the attack on immigrants' lives. So there's been obviously many, many actions that have sprung up in the last few weeks and months, led by Never Again, actions against tech companies that are collaborating with ICE, protests in cities all over the country. But at the same time, many, many people and organizations have felt that those actions could be much stronger with a national scale of mobilization, whether that means one mobilization altogether or nationally coordinated separate actions. Many, many people have had this sentiment that we need that scale of action, but not known how to try to make that happen. And just to say some reasons why we might want to have a specifically national scale of mobilization, rather than everyone's kind of simply doing their own local immigrant rights organizing in their own locales. I think the biggest reason is that it lets every mobilization kind of be more than the sum of their parts, right? So it lets places where the movement that it is just getting started take some momentum from places where it's stronger. It lets us have a much bigger impact on the national narrative around immigration. So a scale of mobilization that is large enough to make national news can create pressure on Democratic candidates, on local politicians who can affect how much that locality collaborates with ICE. And that can all further advance the movement as well. And all of this is important for immediate humanitarian reasons, right? Like we want to constrain as much as possible and as quickly as possible what is politically possible, what Trump and his allies can get away with in terms of immigrant cruelty. But it's also important for affecting the national narrative in a way that prevents immigration from being framed in Trump's terms and letting this be his winning political issue, right? So for all of these reasons, lots and lots of people and organizations have been saying, like, where is this national mobilization gonna come from? How do we make this happen? And in the scale of the attack on them, the longstanding immigrant rights groups that we have worked the most closely with have been really hammered. They're very overstretched, dealing with immediate needs of the populations that they work with. And so a leader of one of the largest ones said to us very recently, she said, "It's time for allies to step up and take action. Keep us in the conversation, but don't wait for us to take action, just go." And I should say that in terms of how that label allies applies to us in DSA, that's really a range, right? So we did a chapter survey in preparation for this call, and we got responses from 22 chapters about their immigrant rights organizing, and it showed there's really a huge range in where DSA chapters are coming from, ranging from ones where immigrant rights has been a longstanding organizing focus and many members of the chapter are immigrants, to chapters where no one is an immigrant and the chapter is just starting to figure out how to relate to this movement, and really everything in between, right? So when I give that quote, I'm definitely not erasing our comrades who are immigrants and from immigrant families themselves, but I hope the point is clear, right? Is that, we're being told, work with us, but don't wait to take action. So in that context, there has been a convergence of our DSA's National Immigrant Rights Working Group with other forces who've been having the exact same conversation, and it's converged around a call for regional and local actions on the weekend of October 12th, which is Indigenous Peoples Day weekend, or what your local school district might call Columbus Day weekend. And so in particular, there's been a convergence of what were 3 separate groupings. So there's DSA's Immigrant Rights Working Group, which is trying to figure out how to carry out the mandate of the convention resolutions we passed. And I think Blanca, is going to come back and say a little bit more about what was passed at the convention. and where this fits into that. But so that's one, is that, this conversation we're having inside of DSA. A second is a group called the Coalition to Close the Concentration Camps, which is a loose coalition of organizations, including some DSA chapters, in organizations and individuals that sprung up starting around 6 weeks ago, to try to coordinate actions. So it's been having weekly conference calls ranging from around 25 to 50 people from a wide range of orgs. So that's the second, is that grouping. And the third is what's called the No More Camps campaign, which is led by some well-known immigrant rights organizers and writers, but not really attached to a grassroots base. And so these three separate groupings, we all got together in a conference call with organizers from a variety of different orgs, ranging from the Indigenous Socialist Organization Red Nation to a group, Doctors Against the Camps. So all to figure out how to try to respond. And what has come out of it is the idea for these coordinated regional mobilizations on October 12th weekend. And Jose has just put into the chat, for those who can see the chat, a draft call to action. This is what we would be hopefully beginning very soon, circulating as widely as we can, to kind of get the national coalition together that's putting out a united public call for these mobilizations on October 12th. And so the idea of these, Elijah will elaborate on this further, but just to get the bare bones, the idea is that every locale should pick a strategic target that is central to the immigration and deportation system in some way. So it could be a detention center, a company profiteering from detention, a local government office that's collaborating with ICE, a national politician that's connected to your locale that's centrally involved in immigrant detention in some way, but it should have some clear connection to the detention and deportation machine. Because the idea is that these actions should not just be one-off events, but initiate or escalate ongoing campaigns, and that the planning for them should be done in a way that builds a base for ongoing campaigns, right? Because no single protest is going to accomplish what we need. But if we do this right, we could come out of the October 12th mobilization with really strong coalitions for ongoing action. And so the idea of organizing regionally is to build really broad-based coalitions of immigrant rights organizations, organized labor, socialists, and others to collaborate and figure out together the key targets. The cities where there are currently already people who are planning to initiate some sort of action this weekend, but at a wide variety of stages of where that conversation is at, the current working list of cities is San Diego, Chicago, Las Vegas, San Antonio, Denver, Burlington, Minneapolis, Western Massachusetts, the Bay Area, Los Angeles, Newark, and Madison. And DSA, I think, can play a particularly key role in making those actions what we want them to be and expanding them to many, many more cities than just the ones that I listed, because we have a base of people that we bring. So, what does that look like concretely for chapters? There's a local component that's going to look really different in every chapter, because the idea is to figure out what makes sense in your area and is going to advance the movement where you are. And Elijah is going to say more about strategic considerations about how to approach that. But there's also a national component. So we want to coordinate publicity, for example, across chapters. We want to make materials that mobilizations in different areas can use to not recreate our work. We want to coordinate national outreach, et cetera. And we're going to put into the chat a link that people can use to sign up for different roles that you might want to take. One thing that we hope might come out of this is that, let's say that there's a campaign against corporate profiteering in Minnesota and in California, or there's a campaign against building new ICE detention centers in Chicago and in Texas. We might be able to help put those groups in touch so that the regional mobilizations can help to build the grassroots base for a more national infrastructure in a very organic way over time. So I think I will stop there and make sure that we get the URL for that sign up sheet into the chat. And I will pass it to Elijah to talk more about the.
Hey there. So I just dropped the link in to sign up. So that, and if Elizabeth, if you can just drop the list of cities in, that would be great. But basically that link allows you to sort of sign up if you want to mobilize in your city or your local chapter if you're not in, even if you're not in a city, or potentially connect to a nearby location that is already having a mobilization. The other thing you can do, even if you don't think that either your location is strategically oriented, you can list out, you can volunteer to get involved nationally, as Elizabeth mentioned. So it has different ways to plug in nationally, as Elizabeth went through that list. So before I go into talking about our strategic orientation, we're going to jump back to Blanca to talk a little bit about sort of the national level priorities around immigrant justice and immigrant rights, what came out of the convention. And to answer Atulia's question, there's not a deadline. We are trying to have a clearer sense of what chapters and what locations by September 1st, but if I recognizing that can take a lot longer for chapters because you need to vote and you need to determine buy-in. So that's not necessary. I would say plug in your info now if you're interested, and then you can assess. That's not a statement of commitment. That's a statement of interest if you sign up. So I'm going to hand it over to Blanca now.
Am I here? Yes, okay, hi. So we passed a couple of really good resolutions, and I want to talk about resolution number 6 on orienting to the Latinx community, because one of the big things was establishing a Spanish language DSA. So there's a call right now for anybody that speaks Spanish that would like to translate. I am helping. We could probably do it together, so let us know. We passed resolution number 5 on the defense of immigrants and refugees. So that makes DSA, we voted to make this one of our top priorities. So everything that we're going to talk about right now is something that I hope each of your chapters is doing. If you need help, there's all of us that are here that could definitely help you. And also resolution number 73. So the open borders resolution. I think I'm wearing that pin too. So I'm very excited about that. As we know, borders really do serve to undermine the international working class, like Elijah has penned. And I think it's great that we're deciding that we are not going to stand for anything less, really. We're going to keep fighting for not just everybody here in the US, but also every working class folk across just internationally. So congratulations to everybody. I think this is going to be great. So look out for the outreach committee too. And so all of us are here to help you.
Great, thank you so much, Blanca. We're going to go back to Jose, who has a little bit more to say to elaborate. Jose, are you ready? Or if not, we can also go back to Elijah, who's going to be talking about organizing coalition. Oh, he's on mute. Okay, I'm sorry. Jose? Oh, we can go back to Jose right after Elijah. So, oh, there you go. Okay, thank you.
Hi. Elizabeth did an awesome job of putting this in context. I want to just bring it a little bit more historical perspective. The pin that Blanca has, which is one like this, except closed concentration camps. No, for over the borders, just 2 versions of it. That drawing is from the 1977 Chicano Latino Conference against deportations held in San Antonio at the end of October that year. And it was against the first proposal to create a border wall. Actually, it was a border fence. That's why the drawing has a border fence. The fight that we are engaged in is one that's been going on for many decades. It took a turn 25 years ago with the President Clinton's something that he called Operation Gatekeeper. They began closing the border between the United States and Mexico. With Trump, however, this a much sharper, xenographic, a white supremacist focus to the attacks. As Elizabeth mentioned, these have come from all sorts of different directions. A Muslim ban, separating children from parents, making green cards harder to get. Citizenship applications are backlogged 2 or 3 years now. There have been lots of fights against what Trump is doing. There have been several instances where courts have stopped him, but often he just retreats and people just think it's okay. Like happened a year ago with the separation of children from parents. The point of this whole campaign is to try to bring together a national movement. And the time for doing it is right now. And the reason this is the right time for doing it is that we're in the middle of an election campaign that Trump has made immigration and a xenophobic white supremacist attacks the central issue of the campaign. Yet the other candidates, including Bernie, are very weak in responding to it. So strategically, this is of great importance for working people in the working class to have a much stronger response to Trump. We have a great base to build on. The majority of the American people agree with us, not with Trump. The Pew Center just did a survey about a week and a half ago, and they found out that by a 3-to-1 majority, Americans want immigrants to stay and not to be deported. They want legalization, not deportation. So that is what we have to work with. I want to stress something that Elizabeth also mentioned, which is the pressure on the Latino and other immigrant communities is tremendous. The pressure on the organizations that we have is tremendous. Often you hear it said, well, we should look for leadership to the Latino community, to the immigrant groups. But the reality is that right now, groups like the one I'm in, FLAR, here in Georgia, are overwhelmed trying to organize our own community. And we are not going to make a priority organizing the general population. I think it's exactly what Elizabeth quoted. It's time for the allies to step forward, and we are those allies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jose. Now we're going to be moving on to Elijah, who is going to be discussing the topic of organizing and also working in coalitions. Elijah?
Yeah, hey, so I'm really glad to have so many people on the call, and it seems like people are from a lot of different places, which means that we could really bring a lot of power to this movement and this mobilization nationally. So really what I wanted to talk about in this section is what it takes to get you there and your chapter, whether you've done an action, a mobilization in the streets before, or if not, and sort of how to think about it politically and strategically. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is, as Elizabeth mentioned, strategic orientation. So one of the things that is being really prioritized is having clear targets. The mobilization nationwide is focused on broadly closing the concentration camps. So that's one demand, and the other one is let everyone in. So the hope is that, you know, on local levels, people will develop further sets of demands. And this might be something that DSA might do for our own set of demands, that because the coalition is broad, not everybody might agree on the same set of demands. But one thing that we have all agreed on is having a strategic target. So that in many cases could look like an immigration detention center, a ICE sort of like a office where they do more of their bureaucracy. ICE also jails people, operates out of local jails and prisons and other detention centers. And then it also operates out of private detention centers. So it operates out of facilities run by companies like Geo Group and Core Civic. And I want to shout out right now our comrades in, I believe, Denver, who elected a city council member who's a DSA member, who booted Core Civic and Geo Group from Denver and got rid of a $10 million contract. So that's really awesome. So those are the kind of strategic points that we want to be highlighting, both the federal forces of immigration detention, but also the private profiteers off of it. So I'm going to drop in right now a link into the chat. For those who are on the phone, you can go to freedomforimmigrants.org/detention-statistics. I mean, this is a basic resource that's easy to find if you Google immigration detention facilities. Now, this is not a comprehensive list, and you may already know the locations, but we want to be focusing our actions on strategic targets. So as you think about whether you'll mobilize locally or not, or maybe to another city, think about what those targets are. The next thing I'm going to talk about is coalition building and mass turnout, because I think those things go hand in hand. As both Elizabeth and Jose mentioned, one thing that we are sort of, you know, in this political moment and in the context of mass mobilizations that are in the streets and more visible, and could, depending on what your chapter's capacities and interests are, might take the form of direct action. They might not be on the ground led by the most directly impacted immigrant organizations. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be communicating with your local immigrant organizations and communicating with other local leftist organizations, other local unions, especially around, you know, we've seen with the workplace raids in Mississippi and with attempts of ICE to enter schools and hospitals. Teachers and nurses are the frontline defenses against ICE. So unions are a really important force in trying to mobilize around this. And other organizations, we've seen a rise in direct action by a lot of organizations that have taken more liberal stances. So it's important to, in building coalitions, both stake out and define your principles that you're organizing around and be clear on what our organizing goals are. And then also be willing to figure out who you're willing to work in coalition with, what organizations they are. Even if you don't always have the same end goals, building a broad coalition is really important for my next point, which is mass turnout. And so one of the main goals of this, it sounds like my audio is breaking up. Can the other or according to one of the, is it good? It sounds good? Okay. So one of the goals of these actions is to try and concentrate the actions in a few key locations, and so but also have it open to a bunch of locales. So organizing that's accessible to everyone, but really trying to get a mass number of people, like at least 100 people at your action, wherever it is that you are. So working in coalition is really important for that. Reaching out to local organizations, and we can help you with that. If you fill out that form, and I'm going to drop it into the chat once more for those on the phone, it's bit.ly/DSA CCCC. That's Coalition to Close the Concentration Camps. And if you can list out coalition partners there, but also if you aren't currently working with folks and don't have those connections, we can help you develop them. And then mass turnout also involves phone banking to your members, doing the outreach both at your meetings, but also calling people up. There's nothing that beats actually calling people, especially when we get flooded with emails and texts every single day. So those are some of the key things. I think the other thing I would say is DSA visibility is really important. I think based on the coalition calls with the wider Coalition to Close the Concentration Camps, DSA is already clearly a powerhouse in this coalition. And that, sorry, there was a comment on the bit.ly. If somebody is having an issue with that, I'll drop the full length link in, just in case people are having issues. But DSA visibility is really huge. We don't, obviously want to take up, the whole airspace, but having DSA messaging, having DSA signs, which we have some already, but we'd love if more people got plugged in and worked on those. And having DSA spokespeople. So if you are not trained in being a spokesperson, we can help develop that. And those are really key components of mobilizing around these core issues. So I just want to reiterate that link, both the Airtable, the Airtable link is where folks can plug in. That has sort of some subcommittees that we've developed that we think are really important to mobilizing around this, including media committee, which would be split into art and design, and then a communications, social media writing-based team, and then a regional logistical support. So if you feel like you've got a little bit more time to help chapters in your area support each other, and then outreach and coalition building. If you're connected with either a bunch of local organizations or national networks and want to work with those on mobilizing for this, that's great, plug in there. And then then there's other. If you have other skills that you want to bring to the table, please select that and we'll plug you in. And I think that leads really well into the sort of the next section that Marvin's going to take up. And I know I covered a lot of ground, as did everybody else, and we'll open it up for Q&A at the end. So if you have questions about that, drop them in the chat or save them to the end.
Great, thank you so much, Elijah. Next up, we're going to have Marvin Benjamin talk about the internal working group organizing, including steering committee elections, the new Discord, and mailing list. Marvin?
Yes, good evening, comrades. I wanted to discuss a few of the things that are going to help the connection and the networking that has been outlined by Elizabeth, Elijah, Jose. Not relying on other, horrendously strained immigrant rights organizations to do the work that we need to connect to each other, to be able to attack ICE as they come to the margins and be able to share resources and things is crucial to our work and our expansion. And it should be done for us by us. So the first thing I'd like to do is plug our National Immigrant Rights Working Group mailing list. I'm dropping the link in there. If you can click that and you can sign up for our mailing list whenever we have emails or pertinent information that needs to go out via email, you'll have that. For our friends that are on the phone call, you can just email us directly and we can add you, or we'll email you back a link. The email is dsa.immigration@gmail.com. Pretty easy. The next thing is, can everyone hear me okay? Okay, great. The next thing would be to talk about how we've just established a Discord. Discord is a chat protocol platform where we can connect and be able to have these conversations in real time. We can have direct messages, we can have regional breakouts, we can have very bespoke breakouts that are specific to types of work. If, like Elizabeth mentioned earlier, if we're going to be attacking, let's say, the detention network, the detention facility network, we need to be able to connect across the country. And that's why we're building the Discord. We do need to verify membership before we invite anybody into to the Discord, but please, anybody that is interested, let's have that be the base where we can do this real-time conversation, be able to send direct messages, be able to connect across the country. If you can email us at dsa.immigration@gmail.com, which again, I will plug into the chat here. We can send you a 24-hour valid invite to the Discord, and we can start having these conversations real time rather than having thousands of emails to sort through. And then the last thing is to discuss the election. The steering committee is supposed to be comprised of 6 co-chairs, of which I am one. Jose, Dwayne, who are on this call, are also co-chairs, but we do need 2 more. We are looking for co-chairs. They are from the Southwest region and from the Northeast region. Just real quickly, Southwest is Arizona, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Texas, and Colorado. And the Northeast region covers Connecticut, Delaware, DC, Maryland, Maine. What state am I missing there? New Hampshire, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, and Vermont. I'm going to send the link out there. It's a little bit.ly link that Elijah kindly made for us. It'll give you all the details of what, there's a link there for our working group bylaws that'll tell you what the roles and the responsibilities are. This will be an abbreviated term. It'll run alongside our term, so it will end in early June. I believe the date is June 2nd. We are going to close that election on the 12th of September, end of day. The candidates will be confirmed on the 19th, and then we will send out links for the actual election. There are a number of questions there in regards to your personal experience and things like that. If you can answer those in earnest, and then we can have a little election so we can better flesh out this working group. That would be tremendously helpful. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Can you just state the URL out loud for those who are on the phone?
Yes, I can. It's bit.ly/NIRWG elect. So that's National Immigrant Rights Working Group elect.
Great, thank you so much, Marvin. All right, with the rest of the call, we're going to be taking Q&A. So if anybody has any questions, please post them in the chat box and we will try to get through as many questions as we can. And thank you so much. If anybody has any questions, go ahead and put it in the chat box. And give us a minute too. If there's a bunch of questions, give us just a minute so that we can put them in order. Thank you so much. Questions or comments also? Anybody have any comments? Also, we would like to hear from the audience if they have any organizing experience and also ideas. So thank you. Oh, somebody would like to, Natalie would like to discuss the Discord again and how they can access that. Marvin, can you repeat that, please?
Sure, I just want to add, there's also a question and answer thing on the bottom. There's a question from Sumter Alton that we can maybe get to right afterwards. I'm sorry, I missed the actual question. Oh, how to get to the Discord. Yeah, sure. If you could just email us directly, we will email you the invite link. You can email us at dsa.immigration@gmail.com.
Thank you so much. Also, now we have, I believe this is Shauna on Stack. I'm sorry, SH. Sean, I'm sorry, Sean
Yep.
on Stack.
Hold on, I just gotta promote Sean to a speaker for a second. Hold on. All right, Sean, you should be able to talk.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, hi, y'all. This is Sean, Las Vegas, he, him. Elizabeth mentioned in the beginning of the call, like, people asking for like allies to get involved. We actually had our first immigrants' rights subcommittee meeting yesterday, and one of our comrades mentioned like suggesting things we could do specifically for those of us who, you know, are undocumented and who do have the privilege of kind of be able to do more than say someone who was undocumented. So like if you had any like suggestions what we can do using our privilege that say that we kind of could offer also as well to like immigrant groups that we could bring specifically to the table because we do have that privilege of not being undocumented.
Did anybody? Okay, all right. Thank you so much. And next on Stack would be Josh.
No.
Who, I'm sorry. Did you?
Oh, sorry. Am I still on mute? Oh, sorry. I'm trying to mute myself.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you had something else to say. Okay, next on Stack will be Josh, who has a question about giving the direct testimony of, the testimony from directly impacted. Josh?
It looks like Josh wrote, didn't mean to put Stack, but Josh had written what would be a good source for testimony regarding what it's like in the camps, add a personal emotional element. I think that I can't speak necessarily to specific sources, but maybe somebody else who's on the call can do that, and we can also develop them and put together a list, especially for press releases and that kind of thing, and statements from locals through our organizing on the Discord. And then, as Rick said, reach out to local immigrant aid organizations, volunteer with them, and you'll get stories.
Did anybody want a direct reply to, I'm sorry, did you not mean direct reply? Should I move on to Stack, Elijah?
Yes, you can.
All right, next up we have Tulia, who is asking, can YDSA members also mass mobilize?
Elizabeth, you want to take that one?
Sure. So what I would suggest is that YDSA comrades fill out that link. We can repost it, but and restate what the bit.ly is, but the link to get involved, check the other box and say that you're YDSA, or you can just email the Immigrant Rights Working Group, but let us know and we will get together all the YDSA comrades who want to mobilize for this to be able to have a conversation together about what makes the most sense and how the working group can support your organizing and how you can support each other.
Really quickly, I'm going to open it up for people on the phone.
So everybody on the phone is actually muted. And so what you can do is maybe this is not the best info security, but I'm going to give you all my phone number right now. So if you are calling in from the phone and want to get on Stack, if you text me, my number is 413-834-1645. You can text me and I'll try and read your questions out. That's 413-834-1645. All right, we can move on with Stack now.
All right, Ashley S., who has texted one of the panelists. Ashley S.?
Sorry, hold on 1 second. I gotta unmute Ashley. Does not look like Ashley is on at the moment. Let's move on to the next person.
All right, is there anybody else on the phone before I get to Arturo? Anybody else on the phone? Oh, wait, you said to text them. All right, moving on to Arturo. He's asked for if will Elijah's list be in the bit.ly site. I'm not quite sure which list they're referring to.
Sorry, who is this question from? Arturo, what Elijah was listing, I can find that in the bit.ly. Yes, that is in the bit.ly. You can link it there. So you can move on to the next question. Maya, you're muted.
Sorry. Next question is from Jian Lee, who asked, how can National provide support and resources to local chapters?
So that question is basically national. So what can the National Working Group? So the National Working Group is everybody on this call, including all of the attendees. So that's why we're asking people to sign up on that bit.ly so that we can build that support network. But what that looks like is maybe your local doesn't have organizational experience in doing a direct action, or making a press release, or being a spokesperson. As we figure out what the needs are in local levels from different chapters, we can provide those resources. But again, this is all going to be member-led. There isn't a magical pool of resources or posters or pre-written press releases from National.
Great, thank you so much. All right, next on stack is, did I get to Rick? Rick P?
I think Rick, was Rick asking a question? Hold on. I'm gonna unmute Rick.
I think he asked, they asked, what about striking private contractors throughout all states, and then posted a link to Reed Sledge.
Rick, you're unmuted now if you want to speak.
Thank you. Yeah, I just hopefully you can hear me okay. I just posted a link that probably a lot of people have seen. It's a map that shows contracts with ICE throughout all of the states, and many members will be very appalled to find the size of contracts in their local areas. Is that something that we want to focus some attention on at some point?
Maybe Elizabeth, do you want to speak to that?
Elizabeth, you're muted.
Sorry, I was distracted figuring out something about the stack. Can someone else take that? I'll take the next one.
So I guess I was talking about strategic targets, so I can take that question. So I think that's a great resource. We will send that out when we do a follow-up. And yes, I think that falls exactly into the sort of list of profiteers that we were talking about, along with Geo Group and CoreCivic are the most known ones, but and they're at the top of this list in ICE vendors. But as this list goes to show, there's a lot more. So I think the challenge will be there is making the messaging very explicit. Somebody like Xerox, for example, if you go to a Xerox headquarters, people are not going to know that they contract with ICE. So it's about making your message as clear as possible.
Really quickly, can someone repeat the bit.ly website for those on the phones so that they can write it down if they missed it?
It's bit.ly-DSA-CCCC.
All lowercase.
All lowercase.
Great, thank you so much. Next was one of the people on the call, Ashley Smith. Ashley Smith, are you ready?
So I believe Ashley is on the phone. Ashley texted you, Elizabeth. Did they text you their question, or just that they wanted to get on stack?
Ashley is on the computer now and could be unmuted, I
Oh,
believe.
great. I see them. I'm going to unmute.
While Elijah's figuring out how to, or is unmuting Ashley, maybe I'll take one of the questions from Q&A. This question is, I love the demands, but I know they aren't likely to happen tomorrow. What are the expected or hoped for outcomes of the October action and future sustained action? Which is a great question. So I think we can think about this in two ways that are related to each other. One is that there are some demands right now that are winnable demands. So for example, getting some companies to divest or stop their work with ICE is a winnable demand. Getting a local government to stop certain kinds of collaboration with ICE is a winnable demand. Stopping a particular planned site of a new detention center is a winnable demand. All of these are not, things we're necessarily going to win, but they're things we could imagine winning, right? And in some cases, we're not going to know what's a winnable demand until we actually try. So like in Denver, our comrade was very surprised that she was able to successfully get the Denver City Council to drop its $10 million of contracts with Core Civic and Geo Group, but that's a tremendous victory. So, and that's the kind of thing that can build on itself and inspire other actions too. So that's one kind of thing, is like there's some things we can do that are advancing in a direct way our struggle right now. But I think the other answer is that we know that winning what we actually want, which is stopping all of the immigrant detention and closing all the camps, et cetera, let them all in. We know that that's going to take a much larger and more sustained level of mobilization. And these actions, I think, can be measured in a large part by how much do they build the base for those actions. So how successful are we in creating networks and coalitions that are going to not just do these as a one-off, but continue to mobilize and make campaigns that can escalate. So that's how I'm viewing this. But it would be great to also hear, from chapters, how that seems to you. What would make it a successful action from your perspective?
Great, thank you so much. And really quickly, I'm going to move it over to Dwayne to answer a question, Dwayne Campbell. But before, just wanted to point out that Josh asked about identifying companies that have contracts with ICE. And Arturo has posted a link to us, backersofhate.org. That will be mentioned in a little bit. So now to you, Dwayne.
Yes, one of the earlier questions was, why do you feel we should be putting our own material out as DSA when there's so much other information out there? There is a great deal of information out there, but my feeling, having worked on this for 20 years, but specifically in the last 2 years, is it's time for DSA to put its own name out there and say that we socialists are in this fight. And so that doesn't take a lot. We take material that we'll produce, put it on a local letterhead. But I think it is time for us as DSA to be in these coalitions. What happens here, I'm in Sacramento, what's happened in Sacramento many times is loose coalitions have come together and DSA has been sort of standing in the audience and not getting recognized. And it's not just recognition, but it's in order to advance the politics we believe in. We're going to have to put out our own literature.
Great, thank you so much, Dwayne. Next is a question from Anjana. She would like to know if the National Working Group, Immigration Rights, US, have been talking to the Never Again organization and also Causa Justa. Have we been working with them?
Up to this point, we have not, and I don't believe of the folks who are mobilizing for this within DSA, we have direct contacts. So if Anjana, you have contacts, or if other people here, please sign up and on that bit.ly so that we can do outreach with you. I want to move to Ashley, who's unmuted right now. Ashley?
Can everybody hear me? Can you hear me? Great. Yeah, I think all this is really exciting. What I just wanted to share is some of the work that we've been doing in Vermont, because the DSA chapter here, myself and several other comrades have taken a leading role in trying to spearhead the formation of a local coalition. I'll put the local coalition's demands and endorsers into the chat box because I think it'll give people some ideas about some of the work that you can do locally. If I can paste it in somehow, I'll figure that out in a second. Anyway, I think we have to build for the October 12th through 14th demonstration, thinking really big, thinking really dynamically, and outreaching to as many forces as possible. And don't think that people will say no. Right now, lots of forces are eager to do things, but they're not yet brought into an organizing space where they can play a role. So I think people have to think big, reach out as broadly as possible, and find a way to unite as many forces as possible. So in our organizing in Vermont, we are a very small area in Burlington, Vermont, and we were able to put together a coalition that includes 62 different groups. We had mass meetings of organizing for mass meeting for Burlington of 70 plus people, and we pulled out 1,000 people to protest the ICE data facility here outside of Burlington, Vermont. I think for big cities, people should think much bigger than that. Thousands of people turning out. I think we have to have mass actions coming up on October 12th through 14th that are rooted in immigrant communities, that are rooted in the Muslim community, and especially rooted in the labor movement, especially after what happened with the raid in Mississippi, where lots of labor unions have begun to take the right kind of stands in defense of immigrant rights as in defense of workers' rights. So I think it's very important that we really seize this opportunity. And as exactly as Blanca said earlier, we have to bring the politics of an internationalist socialist viewpoint right into the middle of this, because the working class movement has no borders. And we have to raise that as much as possible so that we can resist both Trump and challenge the kind of Democratic Party consensus of comprehensive immigration reform, which paved the way for the mess that we've gotten in with Trump. So I'll paste in the demands and the endorsers to give people a sense of the ideas that we came up with in Burlington. And the one thing I wanted to ask is if we could network the New England region, because I think we need to have DSA chapters in the New England region, have a conversation about picking the target in our region so that we get the right one. I think the ICE data facility here in Vermont is a good one, but there's a detention center in Dover, New Hampshire that's a key target as well. And we just need people to come together in a concrete organizing conversation in DSA and with as broad forces as we possibly can have.
Great, thank you so much, Ashley. Next on stack is Sumter, and they would like to know if we are doing YDSA specific coordinating, and also are there any resources that National can provide specific to the YDSA chapters?
So based on the fact that there have been multiple questions about this, I think this demands a sort of more clear coordination with the YDSA members who are part of the National Political Committee. So definitely one of the tasks for us after this is direct coordination with the YDSA leadership, and so that we can build from here so that we can have clear coordination with YDSA. But as Elizabeth mentioned, one of the best ways for YDSA chapters to plug in, especially since it will be right at the beginning of the school year and people's probably capacity for organizing will be somewhat limited, is to make sure that you are working in coalition with other organizations in the area where your college is, especially just speaking from personal experience. Where I went to school, there was a big town and gown divide, and that and if we don't deepen explicitly our organizing on college campuses with local organizations, that divide, which is often a very classist divide, will just get extended. So as Elizabeth said, list YDSA on the form where the other line is, and we're gonna explicitly coordinate with the YDSA leadership around this.
Hi, Arturo, you're about to be on right now, and I just wanted to mention that the best way to mobilize and also to keep updated on DSA National Immigration Working Group is to join the working group. So, Arturo, were going to speak on corporations that make profits off of ICE.
Arturo, you're unmute. You should be unmuted. So, or should be able to speak now.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Hello? Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you so much. I looked on at Free Speech TV. They had, no, I'm sorry. It was Rising Up with Sonali here on the West Coast. They were mentioning the website backersofhate.org, where people can write to the corporations. Also, banks like Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Chase, who apparently are out of investing in detention centers, but who can be sure about that? But anyways, the other corporations, Disney, IBM, Boeing, I mean, Disney out of all of them, I mean, sure, we can write to the companies, but do you guys have any recommendations how we can tell people that Disney is like investing in detention centers, and IBM, I think you guys mentioned Xerox, Boeing, which I took a Boeing plane to the convention center, but anyways, all right, I think that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And this actually relates to the next question from Josh, which is how to ID companies that profit off ICE? And if you wanted to get on Stack, Josh, you can go ahead, or we can, if anybody wants to direct reply, please direct reply in the chat, or also if you didn't get the website that Arturo mentioned, we can send that in the chat as well. So if Josh didn't have any other comments, then I can move on to Catherine. Gonna give a minute for Josh though.
I think that question had been answered through the various links, and that's the last point.
Oh, great. Okay, moving on to Catherine. Catherine is on Stack.
Sorry, Catherine. I just need to unmute Catherine.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm in Northwest Arkansas, and I just wanted to say that we collaborated with some folks in Oklahoma City for the Fort Sill action. And through that, we have stayed connected and kind of we're working on a regional action with Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Kansas. So we're new here, but excited to be here and ready to participate in any way. Our county does participate in 287G. So we are open to local actions, but as well as doing some sort of big regional action. So thank you all.
Great, thank you so much, Catherine. Moving on in Stack is Christian. Christian is up on Stack.
Sorry, I'm not seeing Christian. I just want to unmute them. How does their name spelled? With the
CHRISTIN.
Yeah. Okay.
IAN.
There we go. All right, Christian, you should be able to speak. Christian? Oh, here. I just unmuted you. You should be able to speak now. Christian, it looks like we can't hear you. If you can just type out your question, we'll get to it that way. I'm going to jump in. There's two questions about Indigenous Peoples Day, and Elizabeth can go after me. There was one that came in via text and one in the chat. The one in the chat says, given that Indigenous Peoples Day was chosen as the date, do you have guidance on how to center Indigenous voices in this demand? The other question being, from Jen in Chicago, will we or the organizations we're partnering with be soliciting donations during the Indigenous Day actions? So I can start by saying that Red Nation, which is an Indigenous socialist organization that's primarily based out of the Southwest, is a growing part of this coalition to close the concentration camps coalition, and they have expressed, the intentionality of having a focus around Indigenous Peoples Day, given that the timing is such. So I think it's really important to stress that, especially given how many of the Central American migrants are Indigenous peoples. And then the fact that the violence of the border it goes through a lot of territory of contemporary Indigenous peoples in the Southwest. And so centering those struggles is really important. If your local organization, is considering including sort of that element, I think that's really important. Even just a land acknowledgement is a really great way to do that. But then also collaborations and partnerships, again, stressing that demands may be different on the local level. So if you're collaborating with Indigenous groups, or if there's a clear Indigenous people struggle where you are, I think it's important to find collaboration, because this is about mass mobilization. Elizabeth, do you have other things to add?
Yeah, I really agree with that. I think that chapters should very proactively look for what are the Indigenous organizations in your area. If you don't already have a connection with them, reach out to them, ask what they would like to see happen at this action, if they want to be part of it, if they want to collaborate, and more generally build a relationship, right? Like see what they're working on, and if there's other kind of points of connection with the chapter. The other thing is in the messaging for the events, in what you emphasize about the migrant struggle, there's lots of ways that you can make connections with Indigenous experiences. So, what Elijah said, many of the migrants are Indigenous themselves. One thing we did in Minneapolis is a public memorial for the children, the 7 children that have died in the context of Indigenous detention over the last year. Most of those children were Indigenous. They're mostly Mayan children immigrating from Guatemala. We held a memorial that eulogized them individually at a company that is profiting from the camps, to make it very concrete, like this is what immigrant detention is about. Another way to do it, we had an action in Minneapolis that talked about family separation and the long history of it through running from the boarding schools that the US and the Canadian governments ran to separate Native children from their families, to the family separation policies today. So I think there's lots of points of connection that we can find, but it's really worth trying to find the groups where you are to figure out which ones make the most sense for your action.
And just, sorry, the other question that was asked about this was, will we or the organizations we're partnering with be soliciting donations during Indigenous Day actions? So the Coalition to Close the Camps is running a GoFundMe currently. I think right now DSA has not the Immigrant Rights Working Group, it's not discussed fundraising, and that hasn't been a primary goal of our work historically. If your local chapter wants to do fundraising, I think you should feel empowered to. I think it's critical to be clear in who you're donating the money to, and have transparency around that. And often there are other organizations better suited to that kind of work, given that other ones are incorporated as 501c3s or other things. So that's the advice I would give on that front. Dwayne reminds us that we have 15 minutes left, so I'll let Maya head to stack, but we'll want to round out the conversation soon.
Thank you so much, Elijah. Really quickly, Ashley Smith has posted links to the Facebook and website for the Red Nation Facebook, and also for their website. So if you want to, you can check in the chat box. It's therednation.org for their website, and facebook.com/pg/therednation/posts/. So next we have Dan P., who would like to know, since the mobilization actions are scheduled for the 10th and the 12th, and those days are landing on a weekend, is there any possibility that we could, most targets are shut down, such as ICE offices during the weekend. Can the weekend be for mass rallies and Monday be some kind of direct action actually at the target locations?
Yes, you should choose the exact timing and the target. I think that makes the most sense where you are, and try to build, you know, the broad, as you build the broad coalition that's choosing the target. I think that would be a really important conversation to have as part of that.
And just to clarify, the dates for the call to action are October 12th through 14th. So the 14th is landing on a Monday. So if you want to mobilize on that day, that might make more sense.
Great, thank you. Sorry, I also thought it was until the 12th. So next up on stack would be, I just want to ask if Christian wanted to type the question in chat. We can get to you right after Alonzo. And right now, Alonzo would like to know if there is a place to find the Immigration Rights Working Group, their platform, resolutions, and stance on immigration rights.
And Blanca sent this out to just the panelists, so I'll drop it in for everybody. There is a working group sort of sub-page on the DSA website that I just linked to there.
Quick comment from Joan. Apparently Monday might also be a holiday as well. Does anybody know that?
Well, yeah.
If that's true? Oh.
Being that it, oh, and Elizabeth mentions that it's sometimes a holiday in the Northeast, but not in the Midwest. But that, you know, I think this is a flexible full weekend of mobilizations. So if your action, it makes more sense to hold on the Friday before. I think if that's, this is about being as strategic as possible. So if there's a facility that's open on a Friday, that might make the most sense. The other thing I will say is that when thinking about these targets and strategic locations is trying to balance where is the most strategic target with what might actually further endanger people who are directly impacted by detention. We've seen some mobilizations, including here locally in New York City, where direct actions and occupations have actually made it harder for immigrants who are in detentions or deportation proceedings. So that's why coalition with local immigrant groups is really important, even if they're not taking the lead or participating in the direct action. It's important to check in with them because there may be unintended consequences to that kind of action you take.
Thank you so much. Personal statement, I can vouch for that. ISADA Fresno did a direct action with a Navy veteran who was being a threat of deportation. We did show up with signs and a bullhorn to accompany walking to the ICE office. Previous to that demonstration, he had check-ins every couple months or, you know, spaced out. And after that, he came out and his paperwork said that he had to be back every 2 weeks. So that was a huge retaliation. His lawyers had to take that to court. It was challenged, and he did win the right to extend that check-in time. But please be aware that that really does happen. And also, really quickly, please check the map of ICE detention centers that was posted somewhere. There's a map. I checked it during the call, and Fresno is not listed, although we do have a detention center and also at least one other ICE office administration. So please check to make sure that if you have any of those, that it's listed on the map. Really quickly, I would like to move to Blanca. Blanca, would you like to speak?
Yeah. Hey, I just wanted to give y'all a little bit, I don't know how many folks are on the call from the South, but I wanted to give a little bit of what Northwest Arkansas is doing. Yesterday, we had a power of attorney workshop clinic thing where we partnered up with the Mexican consulate, and they're always willing to have supporters and anything for anything. So I think it's important that while we're mobilizing for this action, that we're also taking preventative steps to help the community for longer than just October 12th and 14th. So some of our folks, Catherine's on the call, some of our folks are always ready to do court watch. So if you know folks that are going to ICE detention, go with them. Try to set up a system and a network of people that take turns, and then just grow from there. Because once you start giving folks an ask, they're more than likely going to deliver. So that, I know that some folks had a question about what do we do if we don't have anything to work with? How do we set something up? And I think for those people, we can definitely help you, like maybe power map your area, maybe get some like individual guidance from any of us or a couple of us. So do not panic. We are here.
Great, thank you so much. Really quickly, if you join the Discord and our working group, we will have a regional channel, so a channel for every area and region. Also, Maya has a question about can we or have we connected with anti-imperialist groups, because they would be a great source for solidarity work, such as organizations from the Philippines, from Palestine, and Venezuela.
So it looks like that's more of a comment, and I think that's a good point. We know that the fight for immigrant rights is also the fight for internationalism, and that this is a joint working class internationalist struggle, and that's really important. And Puerto Rico, as Ashley says, yeah, our struggles are bound up together. Before we're wrapping out, and some people are already dropping off, so I just want to make sure that folks get those links. For the folks on the phone, it's bit.ly/DSA-CCCC. If everybody who responded RSVP'd via the DSA sign up, we are going to add you to the Immigrant Rights Working Group mailing list, and we're going to do a follow-up with links. So if you didn't catch the links now, we'll send them there. We'll plug the Discord and the volunteer sign up again. So just a reminder, if you didn't RSVP via that link, to email dsa.immigration@gmail.com so that we can get that information to you. Are there other closing remarks from anybody else?
Really briefly, I believe that there is a person, Ashley Smith would like to say we should start talking about heading over to DC to mobilize, to close the concentration camps, perhaps mobilizing people to head towards Washington, DC.
Yeah, I'm gonna move to Jose and then Elizabeth, but I will say that the organizational call and demand is for regional actions now. But as we said, this is a long struggle, and that may look like a march on Washington at some point. Jose?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a point that we're focused on this weekend of October 12th, but that's not the only thing that's going on and not the only thing that's valid. There's a very important campaign going on from Mi Gente around No Tech for ICE that is really awesome. The comrades in Chicago are working with other groups in attacking this non-profiteer outfit called Hartman Kids, which is in charge of imprisoning children or the moral equivalent thereof. And there's a group of doctors that just formed against the camps. And they're having actions in DC on October 18th and 19th. And they've also joined the coalition to close the concentration camps. They were on the call that we had last night. And finally, the labor movement is very important in this. You have to understand that the real point of U.S. immigration policy is not to deport the undocumented. It's to keep them here, but keep them without rights so they can be super exploited. The deportations are 200,000 or 300,000 people a year. Trump says there are 20 million undocumented. Yale University said 22 million. So obviously they're not trying to get rid of people. They're just trying to keep people scared and exploitable. And for that reason, it's very important to reach out to the labor movement. The plants that were hit the other day under raids are organized by the United Food and Commercial Workers, the two most important ones. And precisely the most important one, Cooked Foods, is one that a year ago said, oh, we didn't do anything wrong, but we will pay you $3.75 million for sexual harassment and for persecuting Latinos. And guess what? ICE says they started this investigation when? A year ago. This was a reprisal for workers organizing and fighting back. The UFCW put out a very good statement, and they have a group called United Latinos based in LA that we should be relating to. But Trump, also the head of the AFL-CIO, put out a good statement around that raid. So we should reach out to them. And finally, anybody who wants to help me get contact with other people, to national groups, to help me circulate the statement, get a hold of me through Elijah.
Yeah, I don't want to cut you off, but we've got a minute left before we get closed out of the Zoom meeting. So I just want to make sure that we are respecting everybody's time and leaving with all of the information that we wanted to share with everyone. So it looks like, we're not going to get to all the questions. Leon raised a really good point about Indigenous solidarity, and I think we should continue that conversation. So let's bring that to the Discord. Again, dsa.immigration@gmail.com. And I don't know, any other closing remarks before we all sign off? Information to share?
Yeah, just one. So we want to come out of this with a really participatory national working group. That's the only way we're going to be able to make this work. So Jose mentioned national campaigns. We want to have another call in September where we talk about how the October 12th organizing is going, and also start talking about, is there a national campaign or multiple that it makes sense for DSA chapters to take up. So as you do your organizing, please think about what campaigns make sense where you are and might make sense to be beyond your own locality. And we can start that discussion on the Discord and pick it up in September.
Awesome.
Okay, great. Are we ready to end the call, Elijah?
I think we are. Looking forward to organizing with all of you.
Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great Monday. Bye.